So Father Troy is going to come up, work through examination of conscience. Father Troy is a young dynamic priest in their diocese. If you don't know, part of his story is that he showed up at our 2014 conference and God knocked on his heart and said, get back to seminary, boy. And he's now a fully ordained priest here in the Diocese of Calgary doing great work. So Father Troy, come on up.
Thank you, Sean. It's just great to be here. I'm very grateful to God Squad as, been playing a very significant role in my vocation and helping me come back. So today I just really want to give you kind of like a pep talk for confession. One of the greatest gifts that I have as a priest, to be able to hear confession. And I want to begin by talking about a man that you guys know. His name is Frank Abagnale. If you haven't heard his name before, you probably know the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio. And it's the story of this young man who's great at being an imposter, great at wearing masks. You see, he discovered his skill when he was a young man. He was trying to kind of make a living, and he found this cash box. So what he did was he put out of order on the cash box with a piece of paper, and then he stood beside the box dressed as a security guard, holding a box. And he was shocked at how many people gave him money willingly. And so he continued this life of living as an imposter. He passed the state bar exam. He even was a leader for residents for a year. He was teaching students how to become doctors, even though he had no idea. And he eventually left after a year because he almost killed someone. He's like, okay, I'm done. But one of his most famous stints was as a pilot. This is what kind of comes up in the movie. And he began dressing up as a pilot, depositing these fake checks. He deposited up to about $2.5 million worth of fake checks, and he traveled over 1 million miles all over the world. He was great at being an imposter, great at wearing masks. You see, for us as men, sometimes we're good at doing that too. And it's not a bad thing, right? We're tough, right? We gotta hold it together, right? If we stub our toe, we're like, it's okay, right? I remember when I was playing basketball once and the ball was going out of bounds, so I dove for the ball. I threw the ball back in, but then I propelled myself forward into a wooden post between these two doors. And so I split my head. But then, as men, we just get up like, it's okay, let's keep playing. Let's do it again. Just a flesh wound, and then the blood is like pouring down the side of my face. And that's a good thing. This type of masking is good because it's a form of resilience in times of difficulty. But there's another form of masking for us as men that becomes deadly. This type of masking is when we cover up our woundedness and we don't let anybody else know, not even God. And what can begin to happen is these wounds that we have begin to fester, and it in fact gets worse. You see, Frank, when he was becoming this imposter, the reason why he did that was because as a young boy, he was forced to choose between living with his mom or with his dad because they had divorced. And no child should ever have to choose that. But for Frank, he didn't want to make a choice at all, so he ran out of the courtroom and began living this life as an imposter. And you see, for us as men, sometimes we can have our own woundedness from our past, from our own sins, right, from our own weakness. And so we want to run away. We wear masks to hide these things. And there's a deep shame we feel with our own brokenness, our own woundedness. Because if we felt like, if anybody knew about this, that they would think we were not a man, that we would lose our identity. And this is according to the modern kind of machismo understanding of what it means to be a man, to have no woundedness, to have no vulnerabilities. And the reason why this is important in relationship to confession is because confession is literally that place where you say all your brokenness and all your woundedness. But if we live according to this lie and believe that if we expose our weakness and we are no longer truly men, then going to confession is like dying. Going to confession is like exposing the lack of our humanity, our masculinity. And so what Jesus is inviting us today to come to confession is to acknowledge the truth of who we are. Because this modern understanding of what it means to be a man is built on the lie that we are radically independent and that we do not need anybody else. When in fact the truth is, as Jesus reminds us, apart from me, you can do nothing. And so authentic masculinity then means abiding in Jesus, recognizing our radical dependence upon him. And when we're able to take off our masks and allow ourselves to be healed of our woundedness, then we can become the men God has truly called us to be. To think quickly of David. We know the story about David and Goliath and how he's able to take down Goliath. But there's this one scene in between which we sometimes forget, that before he goes into battle, they give him this armor. What does he say? This armor is too clunky. It's not for me, right? And that's a very profound symbolism, profound metaphor. It's almost like he's saying, this armor, it's like a mask. This is not truly me, right? I'm pretending to be this type of person. So I'm going to take it off and allow the Lord to fight in me, because that's where my strength comes from, not from this mask, but from the Lord. And that's why David says in the Psalms, he says, "Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my arms for battle, who prepares my hands for war." It is in the Lord that we are strong. It is in the Lord that we are truly men. And so today I just really want to encourage you, all the men here, to go to confession, to come, as St. Paul says, "Gladly, therefore, will I boast of my weaknesses. The power of Christ may remain in me." That we go to confession to boast of our weaknesses, not to glorify our sin, but to acknowledge the truth of our brokenness and to acknowledge where the true source of our strength comes from. Because right now, my brothers, we are in a war. We're in the midst of a battle, and this battle is even more spiritual than it is physical. And the enemy will pick off imposters, people who are wearing masks, right? Because he can see right through that fakeness. And so by going to confession, we acknowledge the truth of who we are and allow God to be strong in us. And if we cannot do it for ourselves, do it for your wives. God knows she can see right through our masks, right? Do it for your children, your grandchildren, your communities. Do it for your church. Take off your mask. Go to confession and be the real man God has called you to be.